So you mentioned, that Reggie seemed to know everybody because he was from there. He was from Watts at least, and he working as for the electric company. So Reggie told me that like he got to know a lot of these notable gangsters when they were kids. Like he knew Michael Duro, for example, Owl, because he knew his family. And so he was kind of tried to take Owl under his wing when he was a kid coming up. And you knew Orlando Anderson kind of in a similar way, I think.
I was a young patrolman. He was a young gangster. And I was always running into the guy, and he was always active, and I was active, but we was running into each other on different angles. And we shouldn't say respect, but we got to know each other on a different level, where he kind of looked up to me. It's kind of odd. When I looked at him, I saw my son's face in him. The resemblance was quite stunning. And his mannerism, the way he was an athlete, and my son was an athlete. And I could see the resemblance in the two of them. And when I saw the resemblance, something I felt for him because he reminded me of my son, if that makes sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
And, but when I looked at him, I could see my son in him, and I could see my son, if my son had grew up in an environment, being that guy, or him being like my son if he had grew up in an environment my son grew up in. So I saw what each of them could have been, if that makes sense. And I kind of liked the kid. I would talk with him, he would talk with me. He never, whenever he did what he did and I did what I did to deal with him, he never disrespected me. He was always respectful. And I could tell that he had some home training or bringing up. Someone in his family brought him up the right way. He just went astray, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His uncle, too, it seems like, Keffe was raised, based on what he said in his book anyways, was raised well. He was already going out to take classes at UCLA while he was still in high school, and then for whatever reason, he just chose the street life instead.
The street life in Compton can be powerful. At that time, it was very powerful, especially for young men, young black men, and young Hispanic men also. A lot of those kids that had grew up in another environment, say where you grew up and where I grew up, they might have been different people. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Do you remember any specific run-ins with Orlando Anderson that kind of stand out to you?
Can't call it a raid. It wasn't a warrant. We ended up in the house. We ended up chasing a bunch of those guys in a drug house. And we ended up getting some bullets out of there and some other guns, I think. Some guy had a gun. We chased him into the house, and we get in the house. There's a bunch of those guys in there, and we detained everybody and identified them. And I think we recovered some bullets and a gun. We ended up sending that gun to Vegas, some of the bullets, but it wasn't a match. It wasn't the gun. We was always chasing those guys.
Yeah.
They were active, and they were young. And we were young cops at that time. So figure that out, you know.
Yeah, you guys run, we chase you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you remember having run-ins with Keffe?
Keffe? Not so much.
Yeah.
Keffe was more so not the street level guy. He was the drug guy, but he kept a low profile, if you know what I mean.
That's what I've heard. He was kind of in the background.
He was in the background.
He had his soldiers out there, like Orlando and them, doing the dirty work.
He was kind of in the background, you know. The only time we'd see him if we caught him driving in a car, standing out front of his house, but he had nothing, you know. He was big time. He didn't have no dope or guns on him. He was over the gangster years. Now he's a big time dope dealer. But he basically was a shot caller. He was calling the shots for Southside, the Burrs crew anyway.
Obviously, you knew where Orlando was getting the drugs from. You knew where he was getting the money from. He was more like a big brother figure, I think, to Orlando than an uncle. Also, he was leading him the wrong way, obviously.
After it went public that Keffe had done his proffered statement in 2008 where he confessed to all this and named his own, fellow gang members, named Orlando Anderson, his own nephew, as the shooter.
I gave it to Dre, and Dre was like, no. And Lane's like, dude, he popped him too.
So Orlando shot across Dre?
He leaned over on the window, we rolled down the window, popped.
That his neighborhood he had tension.
Wonder why?
Back home. And tension, I think, with, his own family for saying, well, you went and you told the police, your sister's son did this?
Yeah, even though his sister's son's gone, but he still had that.
Right.
That's still in her heart.
Yeah.
You know, and some of the things we told her he did, she was like any other mother. No, my baby don't do that. I don't know if she believed that or not.
Right.
If I found it hard to believe that she couldn't believe that he did that shit, but he didn't do that. But then again, I don't know if I would have believed about my son either. If my son's always in trouble, yeah, I'm going to believe my son. Picking on my poor baby, yeah, I get that. But she was a likable person.
Yeah. And you was talking about him being respectful and kind of soft-spoken when you're dealing with him. He also he had a very clean-cut appearance.
I think that the part I told you about that might remind me of my son.
Right.
The nice Nike tennis shoes, the gear, the clean-cut fade haircut, that part.
Polo shirts and khakis, and yeah.
I could have seen him probably hanging out with my son.
Right.
You know, because he portrayed that image too. But he also had another image that he had.
Right.
That was real. I know that if he had got into a different environment, he could have been a great kid. But
right.
Unfortunately, he had older people pointing him in the wrong direction. From an early age, from a very early age.
Right.
Because if I'm not mistaken, he had got into some shit, excuse my language, some crap with the lad and Brennan. He shot at them.
Yeah, he was with I think Gladys said he was with a group there were 3 of them. Mm-hmm. They were, baby gangsters. They were like 13, 14, I think. And one of the other guys in their group shot because they were trying to get their stripes for Southside. Right. And they were told, hey, if you can take a shot at Ladd and Brennan, you're in.
And all of a sudden, man, bam, 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 bam. All these shots, we can hear them hitting our car, hitting the ground. So we put it out on the radio, and the troops were coming in, code 3, and we cordoned off the block. And by that time, we were kind of out of it, but because we were the guys shot at, so they didn't want us to go in and say something happened, and hey, these guys just wanted revenge, so they just kind of kept us out of it. But they went in the house eventually, and they took 3 juveniles into custody. One was Orlando Anderson, and one was Michael Durow, and the other one was Duck. Can't remember his name, but they call him Duck. He was the actual shooter.
Yeah, I remember that when they got shot out. I was working patrol at the time. I was a patrolman, and we was out there looking for these idiots.
Yeah.
And when I got involved, Ladd and Brennan always tell me, hey, keep an eye on these guys and keep, in the back of your head, know who they are. And that stuck in my head, and I always did. And that's how I got to be gang investigator, because I always watched them, the gangsters. And I remember when they got shot at. It was just stupid kids doing stupid shit. But it wasn't stupid because you could have killed somebody.
Right.
It was very serious what you just did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.